direct and devastating response to the decapitation strikes that claimed the life of the supreme leader, Iran has unleashed a technological nightmare that has officially rendered the most advanced missile defense systems on Earth obsolete. At exactly 0300 hours local time, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps launched a coordinated volley of Fateh, 2 hypersonic missiles, each traveling at the unimaginable speed of Mach 20. Military analysts are calling this the most significant shift in the strategic balance of power in the modern era. For years, the world was told that the Iron Dome and the Arrow interceptor systems provided an impenetrable shield over the region. Yet tonight, that shield shattered in less than 90 seconds. Each of the 15 missiles launched carried a payload of 15 independent submunitions, resulting in a swarm of 225 highly maneuverable warheads that re-entered the atmosphere with a single, terrifying objective. These are not the primitive rockets of the past. These are precision instruments of war that skip across the upper atmosphere, performing evasive maneuvers at 20 times the speed of sound. This maneuverability makes it mathematically impossible for current radar systems to calculate an intercept point. As the warheads plummeted toward their targets, the sophisticated Aegis systems on United States destroyers and the Patriot batteries stationed across the Gulf could do nothing but record the impending impact. The primary targets were the very military installations used to coordinate the recent bombing of Tehran and the strike on the underground bunker. Reports coming out of the region indicate that Nevatim Air Base has suffered catastrophic damage, with satellite imagery likely to show that the runways and hardened aircraft shelters have been turned into smoldering craters. The psychological impact of this strike is just as significant as the physical destruction. For the first time in history, a regional power has demonstrated the capability to strike any target with total impunity, bypassing the billion-dollar defense networks funded by the American taxpayer. This is no longer a localized conflict. It is a global demonstration of the new reality of warfare, where speed and precision have outpaced the ability to defend. The era of the Iron Dome is over, and the era of the hypersonic nightmare has begun. As the dust settles over the impact zones, the cold reality of the Mach 20 nightmare is setting in for military strategists in Washington and Tel Aviv. The Fateh 2 missile represents a leap in physics that Western technology simply was not prepared to counter. While the Iron Dome was designed to intercept short-range, predictable artillery rockets, and the Arrow system was built to stop ballistic missiles on a parabolic arc, neither was designed for a weapon that can change its flight path while traveling at 15,000 miles per hour. This is where the 15 submunitions change the game entirely. Imagine a single missile body detaching its nose cone to reveal 15 independent warheads, each equipped with its own guidance system and cold gas thrusters for terminal maneuvering. This creates what experts call a saturation dilemma. Even if an interceptor could theoretically match the speed of a hypersonic glider, it would have to choose which of the 15 targets to engage. For every one missile launched by Iran, the defense network must launch at least 30 interceptors to ensure a high probability of a kill. The math is simple and devastating. The cost of defense has become infinitely higher than the cost of the attack. Each Iranian submunition costs a fraction of the price of a single interceptor missile, which can run into the millions of dollars. As these warheads rain down on their targets, the radar screens at the combined air operations centers did not just show a few incoming dots. They showed a swarm that looked like a digital cloud, blinking out of existence and reappearing in positions that defied the laws of traditional ballistics. In the high-stakes environment of the Situation Room, the atmosphere was one of total paralysis. Orders were given to fire everything, yet the interceptors were chasing ghosts, exploding in empty air as the submunitions performed high-gravity turns that no human or machine could follow. This was the moment the Iron Dome officially became a relic of a previous era. The tactical superiority that the West relied upon for decades has vanished in the span of a single night, replaced by a vulnerability that cannot be fixed with a software update or a new battery of missiles. The strategic landscape has been leveled, and the consequences are only beginning to be understood. The geopolitical shockwaves from the Mach 20 strikes have immediately paralyzed the global energy markets. Within 1 hour of the confirmed hits on regional military infrastructure, the price of Brent crude surged by 30% as traders realized that the most vital oil artery, the Strait of Hormuz, is now effectively under the control of Iranian hypersonic batteries. For decades, the United States Fifth Fleet has maintained a dominant presence in these waters, acting as the ultimate guarantor of global commerce. However, the demonstration of the Fateh 2 system has fundamentally changed the calculus for naval commanders. An aircraft carrier, the crown jewel of American power projection, is essentially a 4.5-acre target that moves at 30 knots. Against a weapon moving at Mach 20, even the most advanced carrier strike group has zero reaction time. If 15 submunitions can overwhelm an entire land-based defense network, a coordinated swarm against a carrier group would result in the total destruction of billions of dollars in hardware and the loss of thousands of lives in a matter of seconds. This realization has sent a chill through the Pentagon. Intelligence reports suggest that the United States is currently reconsidering the positioning of its naval assets, pulling back several carrier groups to a safe distance outside the range of the hypersonic envelope. This tactical retreat, while necessary for survival, creates a massive power vacuum. Regional allies who once relied on the promise of American protection are now looking at the sky with a new sense of dread. The economic consequences are even more dire. With the threat of hypersonic strikes looming over every major port and refinery in the region, insurance rates for oil tankers have skyrocketed to prohibitive levels, effectively halting the flow of energy to Europe and Asia. We are no longer talking about a regional skirmish. We are witnessing the collapse of the post-war security architecture that has defined global trade for 80 years. The ability to deny access to the sea is the ultimate strategic lever, and tonight, that lever is held by those who possess the speed of the hypersonic nightmare. Inside the halls of power in Washington, the atmosphere has shifted from one of aggressive confidence to a state of absolute strategic panic. For the past 72 hours, the narrative from the White House had been one of total victory, following the successful strike on the Tehran bunker and the elimination of the supreme leader. President Trump had addressed the Iranian people, calling for them to seize their freedom while bombs were still falling. However, the sudden and brutal arrival of Mach 20 missiles has shattered that confidence. In the underground Situation Room, military advisors are now grappling with a terrifying reality. The United States has no active defense against this specific class of weapon. The rhetoric coming from figures like Lindsey Graham, who promised a mass murder campaign that would blow the hell out of the enemy, now rings hollow as the military realizes that every carrier and every base in the region is a sitting duck. There is a deep and widening rift between the political leadership and the professional military staff. While politicians continue to demand an escalation, the Joint Chiefs of Staff are reportedly warning that any further direct strikes on Iranian soil will trigger a secondary volley of Fatah-2 missiles, potentially targeting the remaining American infrastructure in the Gulf. This is the classic definition of a strategic checkmate. The psychological warfare that was intended to break the Iranian regime has instead backfired, creating a unified front of resistance powered by a technological edge that the West did not believe existed. As the world watches, the Pentagon is scrambling to find a solution, but physics cannot be argued with. You cannot intercept what you cannot track, and you cannot track what moves at 5 miles per second. The political fallout is equally severe, as the American public begins to realize that the nation has been led into a high-intensity conflict with a near-peer adversary without a viable defense strategy. The Aegis systems on the destroyers and the Patriot batteries that were once considered the gold standard of defense have been exposed as totally inadequate against this new reality. Every simulation run by the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency has yielded the same result: total failure of current interceptor technology. The era of unilateral military dominance is being buried in the sand of the Middle East, one hypersonic impact at a time, leaving the administration with no good options and a rapidly closing window for diplomacy. The global ripple effects of the Mach 20 strikes are now manifesting in the halls of the Kremlin and the Great Hall of the People in Beijing. As the United States struggles to calibrate a response to its shattered defense shield, Russia and China are observing with what can only be described as calculated satisfaction. For years, the strategic doctrine of the West was built on the assumption of technological invulnerability, yet the Fatah-2 has proven that a determined regional power can bypass the most expensive military infrastructure ever built. Intelligence agencies are now urgently investigating the origins of the miniaturized guidance systems found in the Iranian submunitions. There is growing suspicion that a quiet exchange of high-tech data between Moscow and Tehran may have accelerated this breakthrough, turning Iran into a lethal testing ground for the next generation of warfare. This is not just about a single conflict in the Middle East. It is about the global perception of power. When a carrier strike group is forced to retreat because it cannot defend against an incoming swarm, the very concept of power projection changes overnight. In Southeast Asia and Eastern Europe, nations are taking note of this shift. The deterrent value of the American flag is being questioned as the images of smoking ruins at Nevatim Air Base circulate across the internet, bypassing the traditional media filters. The decapitation strike against the supreme leader, intended to bring the Iranian regime to its knees, has instead acted as a catalyst for a new era of multipolar defiance. We are seeing the birth of a world where the speed of light and the speed of sound dictate the terms of diplomacy, rather than the size of a nation's treasury. The Iranian response has shown that the era of the unilateral superpower is effectively over. By demonstrating that they can hold the world's energy supply and its most advanced military assets hostage with a handful of hypersonic missiles, they have forced a total re-evaluation of global security. The strategy of maximum pressure has met the reality of maximum velocity, and the world is realizing that there is no going back to the old status quo. The nightmare is not just for those under the flight path of the Fata II. It is for every leader who believed that the age of Western dominance was permanent and untouchable. As the final echoes of the supersonic booms fade, the international community is left to reckon with a world that has been fundamentally reshaped. This is the new reality where the traditional symbols of American power, the aircraft carrier and the advanced missile battery, have been reduced to legacy systems. The Mach 20 nightmare has proven that the technological gap the West once enjoyed has not just closed, but has been leaped over by a new generation of asymmetric warfare. For the planners in the Pentagon and the strategists in the White House, the focus must now shift from the pursuit of total victory to the desperate search for a stable exit. There are no more easy answers. The threat of 15 submunitions targeting a single objective with absolute precision is a permanent shadow that will hang over every diplomatic negotiation from this day forward. The failure of the Iron Dome and its sister systems is not just a tactical setback, it is a systemic collapse of the defensive philosophy that has governed the 21st century. We are moving into an era of deep uncertainty, where the cost of miscalculation is no longer a localized skirmish, but the potential destruction of entire national infrastructures in less than 10 minutes. The human cost of this escalation is already being felt across the globe, as energy prices continue to fluctuate wildly, and the threat of a wider conflict remains at a knife edge. However, the most lasting legacy of this moment will be the realization that the era of absolute security is a myth. The Fata II has demonstrated that in the age of hypersonic velocity, the only true defense is the prevention of conflict itself. As nations scramble to adapt to this terrifying new landscape, one thing is certain. The world we knew before 0300 hours on that fateful night is gone forever. The transition to a multipolar order is no longer a theoretical debate among academics. It is a reality written in the scorched runways and silent radar screens of a failed defense. The Mach 20 nightmare has delivered its message with brutal efficiency, leaving the global community to pick up the pieces of a broken status quo while looking nervously toward a horizon where the next strike could arrive before the warning is even issued. This is the final conclusion of a decade of escalation, a moment where the limits of power were reached and exceeded, changing the course of history for generations to come.